Women from a really tender age are forced to think about motherhood. Whether they want to be a mother or not, there's a constant hum there. The stress and anxiety and anguish that can be caused by our desires to be a mum or not is real. Over the years, I have talked to hundreds of women about their experiences of their reproductive lives, of their pregnancies or their wish-for pregnancies, or for their non-pregnancies. The stress and anxiety and anguish that can be caused by our desires to be a mum or not is real. And it isn't spoken about enough, and it isn't understood enough. In the language of the kind of therapy speak, it's what's called a disenfranchised grief, which basically means it's a type of grief that doesn't get a proper airing or a proper respect. We live in a fiendishly pro-natal society, and women in particular bear a pressure to become a mother, to bear fruit, if you like. From a very tender age, we tune into this hum of motherhood that goes on, and now well into our 40s or even our early 50s, with the prospect of fertility treatments offering that to us. I was originally drawn to this area of work as a result of personal experience. Over 20 years ago, my first pregnancy, a much wanted pregnancy that took a while to conceive, ended in a very late miscarriage of baby twin girls. I was in the 22nd week of my pregnancy. That involved a hospital admission and labouring of two babies. But yet, when I left hospital the next day, it was relegated as a sort of mere miscarriage that I should sort of take on the chin. I was met with, pretty much a wall of silence and misunderstanding. Nobody really quite understood the profound nature of my loss and our loss with my partner. A lot of my friends and family were doing their very best, but the truth is it wasn't good enough. And quite often I was met with people looking at their feet rather than my eyes, and acknowledging the loss of two baby girls that I had named and went on to bury in a funeral service. And I felt desperately isolated and misunderstood. I did go on to have a living baby after that, and then 3 more miscarriages at an earlier gestation before completing my family with my other son. But over that decade of loss, I became increasingly committed to change the story around pregnancy loss, and indeed infertility. I guess I've encountered three types of issues that women might be grappling with. One of which is around their decisions to carry on trying to conceive, and that might be involving some pretty grueling fertility treatments. There are those who might have completed their families and ostensibly sort of arrived at their goal, but yet still mourning some unresolved losses from the past, whether through terminations or pregnancy losses. And then there are those women who might not be mums because they have chosen not to be, but yet still feel a bit puzzled by their uncomfortable feelings around that. And then there are those women who are not mums, and that might be because they have been unable to conceive and they're still trying to come to terms with that. I talk to women who aren't mums. And it might well be that they chose to be that way and knew for a very long time that they didn't want to be a mother. But yet, having said that, they're feeling conflicted or even puzzled by some uncomfortable feelings around that choice. I would say that that's worth paying attention to, and perhaps unpacking a bit further, because there might well be some messages in there from culture that have confused you and made you wonder whether you have made the right choice. Because I think that women still bear huge pressure to be a mother, to be a kind of proper feminine creation. I think it is worth considering taking stock of those feelings and asking yourself whether you are responding to some pressures from the outside world, whether it's from the media or your friends or your mum or your auntie or your cousin, who might well be explicitly or implicitly suggesting that you need to be a mum in order to fulfill your life. So if any of this is making sense to you, I would encourage you to press the pause button and take stock and ask yourself whether this grief really is yours, or is it someone else's? Because it's perfectly possible to feel fairly resolved about not wanting to be a mum, but also feeling sad about that at the same time. The two can run in parallel. So there are also many women who I meet in my practice who have been desperate to be a mum, but for whatever reason, and it might well be unexplained reasons, they aren't going to conceive, or they just want to draw a line in trying to conceive. And to face a life of not ever being a mother. And that can be an enormously difficult decision to make, or fact to come to terms with. Not only is this obviously a tremendous loss to bear, but there's also something about acceptance that your life isn't going to pan out in the way that you may have hoped it had. Acceptance isn't necessarily a quick thing. It can be a process. But I do talk to lots of women who go through that process and come out the other end. Miscarriage is really common. 1 in 4 pregnancies end that way. What I do know is that grief is very real. It is a grief, and like any other grief, it does not have a shelf life. We can forge extremely strong bonds with our unborn babies. And whether that baby that we lost at 6 weeks of pregnancy, or 10 weeks of pregnancy, or at full term, that bond is profound, but it is woefully misunderstood by the outside world. They can't see it, but we know it, and it's such a complicated loss. It involves not just the loss of the physical baby, but all the hopes and dreams and desires that we would have plotted out for months and maybe years. Every culture has a pecking order of grief, and in ours, and for many, many years, the death of a baby, either at birth or during a pregnancy through a miscarriage, persists way down at the bottom, leaving women and their partners, couples, feeling incredibly isolated and often pretty angered too. This silencing of reproductive loss compounds what is already a very real anguish. It just makes it that much worse. There is no shelf life to losses that we have in pregnancy. And it's not at all surprising for us to feel a tremendous sadness for a loss we might have had many years ago, maybe even before we had our family. You might find yourself bursting into tears at a film, or in a shop, or seeing a baby in the buggy on a bus. I would ask you to take that really seriously. Pay careful attention to those feelings, because they're telling you something, and they're telling you that you might well have packed away some feelings many years ago that needed a proper airing. If you find yourself with these feelings that are bubbling up, really perhaps kind of nipping at your heels, I think that's a good sign to tell you to pay attention to these feelings, and to talk them out if that feels comfortable, either with a friend or your partner, even online through charitable associations and pregnancy loss websites. It might be that you've had a very recent miscarriage, and what I would say is that it's entirely usual to experience a whole range of feelings. You might be feeling, of course, tremendously sad, but it's also really normal to feel angry, if not livid, and indeed envious of other women who have been able to ostensibly sail through their pregnancies. That is entirely normal, and I would encourage you to just give yourself a bit of time. If after a couple of months you're still feeling the same, and things are feeling a bit sticky or even worse, I think that is a good time to consider talking more, either professionally or with trusted friends or family, or again, online. There are some fantastic resources that can be really nourishing. the frontiers of baby making have advanced hugely, and it's now possible for women to conceive well into their 40s, or indeed I support women who might even be in their early 50s. In those cases, it might well be with the help of donor conception from donor eggs and donor sperm. But I don't think I've spoken to a woman ever who has been through fertility treatment who has not found it an intensely grueling and stressful experience. It's full of dashed hopes and despair. It's also often incredibly expensive and time consuming, and that has a profound knock-on effect to our daily lives. It's extremely common for women and indeed their partners and couples to experience high anxiety and or even depressive symptoms, a lowering of mood, as so much focus goes into trying to conceive. I've heard time and again expressions like, my life feels like it's on hold, or my life is just sort of taken over. And that can have a huge knock-on effect to a working life and a social life. Often people feel like they don't really want to go out at all and face the world. If this chimes with you and you're going through a process like this and feeling the stress of it, I want you to know that you are not alone. Roughly 1 in 6 couples suffer from infertility, and those figures might be rising as we push parenthood more and more to a later age. Please bear in mind that you should take your feelings seriously, because these are extraordinary measures taken for the mind and body and soul. Perhaps you're not sleeping well or at all. Your mood is really tanked, and that you know that your motivation is sort of out the window and you're unable to do things easily that you normally would, then I'd really think about that, because there is support out there. Take these symptoms seriously. Think about talking therapy. There are plenty of therapists like myself who specialize in the area of reproductive loss. And indeed, there are some fantastic online resources and charities. There is not enough research out there to really understand women's health, and particularly their reproductive lives. It's hideously underfunded, and that sort of thing really pisses me off. And the stark fact is that we are still up against it in so many areas of our life. But my particular corner around mental health is something that I will want to carry on fighting for.